Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in a little bit more in depth on understanding the sort of subconscious relationship, desire, and needs that are satisfied when you begin to accommodate and become over obligating, over accommodating to a difficult relationship, a difficult person. They might be narcissistic, they might be psychopathic, but to some extent, a degree of self denial, self neglect, and self sabotage then is required to maintain an equilibrium in the relationship. This is kind of like the narcissist off balance or the psychopathic off balance zone of the relationship. It takes an imbalanced state. And a lot of relationships are in that unbalanced state. Just like when you're learning a new class, you might have a lot of new textbooks. You might be working harder. You might be temporarily, trying to get everything organized. But that's a temporary state. When you begin to get into relationship conflicts, these tensions begin to become ongoing for a chronic and ongoing basis to the point where it's negative or deleterious for usually one or both parties involved. But generally, with difficult relationships and there's, manipulation, it's generally, more difficult for the target, rather than the person who is doing the manipulating. And the very important thing to understand, really, I think it's a great viewer question, because the tricks, the tactics, really are quite effective. They work so well. They disarm you of your self-esteem. They disarm you of your truth. They disarm you of your perspective and your need for perspective on things. So they disarm you and making you feel that you don't need these things to justify them in the relationship. In other words, they take over sort of a subtle authoritative stance, and you don't realize that they're trying to say, I am in the right and you are in the wrong. And usually it's a very split line between they are always in the right and you are in the wrong. So you've got this constant emotional volleying back and forth. So you're constantly feeling at it's a constant feeling of being at an adversity or up against. There's not a feeling of harmony or working things out together. Mutual respect, mutual honesty, mutual boundaries and standards to where those can be. There's a complete deprivation for one side, so it can become very off-kilter in a very off-balanced relationship. The problem for the target and the problem for the supply is that they can then begin to feel that the new normal for them is this agitated state, is this over-accommodating, people-pleasing state, where they're, feeling that they must attend to others always and as a priority and never checking in with themselves. And never being able to, live in that space. Also if people then act it out, there's also the problem is that then if you do sort of try to break free or break out of that, sort of value matrix that they present. In other words, if you do want to question things or you do need something to change or you do need them to hear you out on something and you feel, and then they're constantly unhappy, you then ultimately will then be led to believe that you're responsible for their unhappiness. And I think that's part of the problem that keeps the trauma bond is there becomes this sort of unquestioned sort of accepting of responsibility for the unhappiness of another. And that becomes a real enmeshment, a real, fusion, and a real important thing for you to acknowledge and validate and go, whoa, like I have committed to something that is, not only, impossible, unfeasible, but it's not rational. It's based out of sort of an over-accommodating to an over-projection from the narcissist. So as you know, with the narcissist, they operate with a lot of grandiosity, a lot of sort of fantasy, that they have this sort of illusion, and they might be sort of acting as if they're going to save others, um, you know, uh, you know, um, just that feeling that they are the one who's going to save you or save the group or save the family or save the workplace. They just might have, otherwise known as maybe a narcissism or like a superiority disorder or superiority complex or something like that. They're just, too cool for school. These people, they don't think they need to be told anything or learn anything. They're always in the right. And they frankly don't care how others feel or others' viewpoint or others' perspective. They just don't take that or factor that into consideration. They always want to see things their way and their way only. So they really never get to know others, and others never really get to feel that they have been known by them, because they just sort of, they just sort of are in this egotistical bubble that is very limiting, really, to a difficult or manipulative individual. So this will then create a need to become over accommodating to them. So it's an actual response to this stimulus, which then people learn and then pick up and then transfer it onto other relationships or other settings. So they think that the way to function or the way to be or the way to represent themselves or their I am becomes in this very servitude, docile, backbreaking, or overly humbling or self-depreciating or self-depreciating manner, which basically you're like, I'm a doormat, walk all over me. I mean, so people don't realize that they have been presenting themselves not only to the narcissist but to the world, their workplace, even to themselves as that. So they feel that they've lost perspective, and you might need to correct this, and realize that you are not responsible for the mistakes of the narcissist. You are not responsible for their unhappiness. You are not responsible for their rage. You are not responsible for their withholding or withdrawal of information. You are not responsible for their wrongs. Their wrongs are their wrongs. It's just oftentimes people find themselves in a very reactive or helpless, learned helpless state where they're just acting in a reaction, and it's very disempowering and very unliberating. It creates a lot of constriction, a lot of paranoia, and becoming creating a lot of antithesis to happiness. So a lot of unhappiness, feeling of being lost, lack of confidence. So it's very important that you realize the cause that creates this effect of this dynamic, and then be willing to shift it. Be willing to say, I see the cause that's created this effect, and I'm willing to shift it now. And I no longer need to over accommodate and over obligate myself to others in ways that are harming to me or my values. I no longer need to do that. That is not required. And I'm not responsible for other people's reactions or their happiness. You might have made yourself feel that way before, or you might have been led to believe by someone who was manipulative that you were responsible for their agreeableness or their disagreeableness, or what they showed you in the relationship or didn't show you, and that if you could only been a different way or done, things would have been different. And then there's all this self-blame that people are then, beating themselves up with. Realize that it is not your fault. You can't take responsibility for their mistakes, their disorders. You're holding, because you have to realize they don't, you'll see as the relationship plays on, they don't ever hold themselves responsible or accountable for any of the demise. Maybe they're waiting to hear, and I'm sorry. Who knows what they're waiting for to hear? You might not ever hear it. So you have to realize that they're oftentimes not ever feeling that they have done anything wrong. They oftentimes feel that that the wrong is on the other party. So this is a real conflict. You're not seeing things eye to eye. There's going to be just two different, and so it is, and so it is, and so it is. Just let it be. Just allow it to be. And you have the right to your perspective, though, but realize that oftentimes that is the state that has been denied you from the relationship, or that belief system that had been created as a result of the relationship. So if you take it one step deeper, you have to understand that foundational to the relationship is a belief system. And so your beliefs about yourself, the world, the relationship, even things that were, destined for your future, are embedded in that. And so you don't always call it up in your awareness, but you have to understand that that is always, when you're talking about healing and really being liberated, you have to understand that part of the limbic mind and that emotional side that's been with us for millions of years, that emotional brain, that feeling and sentient aspect, that is oftentimes the house of a lot of what, your beliefs, what you truly believe about yourself and life and the divine, or your future, or your relationships, or your career. So your beliefs can be self-supportive, or they can be self-limiting. So I think it's very important to do a little bit of self-reflection one time and go, wow, is this relationship really founded on some self-supportive beliefs, or is it based on some self-limiting beliefs? And if you've looked at it and made the error of it being based on self-limiting, then realize that oftentimes you were indoctrinated or taught to believe in these negative self-limiting beliefs. So you really have to kind of go back and find, when were these basically programmed or installed, these self-limiting beliefs that you had to always lay yourself down like a doormat, or you had to always put up and shut up, or you could never be happy, or someone else would be unhappy. You get oftentimes a lot of these, unconscious things going on, and people feel overly responsible for others. And meanwhile, they've missed being responsible for themselves. It's a real conundrum. So let's see if we can correct that. And you feel, the grace and the gratitude and responsibility and mercy and surrender to being self-responsible. And then realizing that you can then trust that the process will give you a feeling of completion and wholeness and satisfaction of those deep needs. Oftentimes it might still be hurting if they're based on that negative self-limiting belief, and then that heal will be healed. That hurt will be healed once you're willing to go through the process and open up and heal those negative self-limiting beliefs so that they're a little bit more self-supportive. You've got this. Peace be with you. It's your buddy, Peace and Harmony. I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and please donate for more great tools, videos, discussions, and support. Peace out, peace in, peace be with you, and have a beautiful day.